Futures in Fundraising is presented by Alexander Haas. Alexander Haas, transforming institutions that transform lives.
Welcome to Futures in Fundraising. I'm your host, David King, President and CEO of Alexander Haas. Today, our guest is Anthony Rodriguez. He's the producing artistic director and co-founder of Aurora Theater.
That's me.
Thanks for being with us today, Anthony.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The funny thing about Futures in Fundraising is we almost always start by looking at the past. And It's kind of ironic, but that's just how it seems to go around here.
Got nowhere to start, right?
So I wanted to ask you, you have essentially spent your entire adult life working in the theater, going back to a BFA in college. And
I wouldn't say my entire adult life, but we'll get to that in a second, I think.
I wanted to know, so how were you introduced to the theater, and what was it about theater that led you to make a career out of it?
Well, those are two very different questions right there, or very different answers. So I was introduced to the theater by my parents, right? They took us to different shows. I fell in love with all the trappings of theater, the actors, the costumes, the lighting. Thought all of that was incredibly beautiful and incredibly personal, right? Because you're right there. It's human beings expressing themselves directly to an audience. There's no TV. There's no film. There's nothing.
No pausing to go to the bathroom.
Well, I was born before that, right? So we both know that we were pre-VCR people.
That's true.
So I loved that sort of personal interconnection between the art and the audience. So that started me down that road. Had some great teachers in high school that encouraged, they came and sought out football players and people on the different sports teams at the high schools to be in some of the productions because
to make them cool.
Yeah, well, yeah, to make them cool, to make people want to be a part of those teams. And so I was part of that. And then when I got to college, and I'll be perfectly honest here, I thought about being a lawyer because I wanted to present things in front of people. And it had a math requirement, and theater did not have a math requirement. That is exactly how I chose my degree track.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So what did you do? What happened from there? So you get a fine arts degree at Georgia, and
luckily I spent a lot of my time, besides performing in college, learning how to build scenery. So when I got out of college, those were the sorts of part-time jobs I took on to try and continue to be an actor, a working actor, someone in the theater, to have a life in the theater, right? Okay. Now, of course, I also took on many other part-time jobs. I spent a lot of time, my father was with the Ritz-Carlton, so any summer jobs were spent being like, a beach bum and handing out towels and pool boy.
Setting up umbrellas and that kind of stuff.
Setting up umbrellas because he was at the Ritz-Carlton Naples. And so I learned a lot about customer service through that experience. Okay. And so those are really the two things that I have had the most experience in, customer service and theater. And that those things have blended very well, I think, for positioning the Aurora Theater as very different. I go to a lot of theater, and I constantly see that at the end of any given evening, there's the door. The show's done, you're done. You walk out and you leave. Well, we completely changed how we interact with our patrons in that respect. Somebody is always there at the end of the show so that the patrons can have some sort of closure. They can thank us. They can tell us we did the worst job ever. Whatever they want to express to us, we're there to accept that praise or that criticism and give them an outlet for it. And it became incredibly important when you're starting this theater, where people in the community didn't really know us. Some of them don't have any background in going to theater, don't have that sort of tradition, and so it was all about getting friends to, like the old commercial, and you tell two friends and so on and so on and so on, right? It was exactly like that. It was building those relationships, talking to people. And for some people, it was no more than, you know what, Anthony and Ann Carroll are really great people. We like them. Go see a show at the Aurora Theater. And those are the ways we continued to build our audience. We started with 120 season subscribers. Now we have right at 5,000 season subscribers, which is huge. Years ago, they were saying, several years ago, they were saying that the membership model, the subscriber model for theaters was dead.
Yep.
I don't know if we had anything to do with it, but they're back on the people should be subscribers. Because people want a deal. They still want the best price, and they want that support. And those people are the ones, our subscribers are the ones that have a great commitment to what we do. Some of them also donate on top of their membership package. Some of them don't. But for the most part, they are committed to what this theater means in our community.
So you hinted at this, and I want to ask you if you'll take us through it a little bit. You and Ann Carroll started this theater 22 years ago, a little over 20 years
23,
ago.
We're in our 23rd season.
Year.
Yeah.
As I understand it, sort of in an abandoned storefront as your first theater.
Well, it wasn't abandoned, but yeah.
Empty, vacant. It was vacant.
No, it was just, it was a former hardware store and then converted into a theater. And
so tell us a little bit about going from a converted hardware store, that sort of the challenges, the opportunities, the journey to the theater you are now with 5,000 subscribers.
So we've always been in Gwinnett County. We started in the city of Duluth, and that we were in the old Parsons hardware store. We couldn't build scenery that was over 8 feet tall.
You had to hire really short actors, right?
Right. Well, if you were tall, you could fix your own lights. It was always super hot in there because when you have that many lights, that low a ceiling, it was just treacherous as far as how hot it could get in the theater, especially if a unit went out, which happened all the time. So we were growing, and we kept growing, and we improved the space as much as we possibly could. The special purpose local option sales tax for the first time was being designated to the cities, not just the county deciding how cities would get it, but cities would get a portion of that. And so the cities were deciding to do certain things. And we had high hopes that we would be able to create something in the city of Duluth. We weren't able to craft that deal. And we looked elsewhere and got some advice from different folks around the county. And we were able to have a conversation with a developer in Lawrenceville who had bought up many of the properties, Emery Morseberger. And he said, you know what? Let's look at this. Well, actually, the first meeting I thought was the worst meeting I'd ever had in my life because I didn't think he was interested. But he sent someone who was working with him to see the show we were doing in Duluth. They liked what they saw. Within about a week, we had a meeting between our board and the city of Lawrenceville. He owned the church building that we renovated. And he said, I'll sell it back to the city of Lawrenceville as long as you work with the Aurora Theater to craft some sort of entertainment complex. And so we did. We worked with the city of Lawrenceville to build that facility. Emery had sold the building back to the city for what he paid for it, not anymore. He didn't want to make money off it. He just wanted to make sure that we were bringing people into the city.
Downtown Lawrenceville, right?
Yeah, and I mean, he had no idea how well this would actually go. They didn't know who we were. The city of Lawrenceville had no real relationship with us, and that's been built over time, and that trust has been built over time. But the special purpose local option sales tax, along with our capital campaign, allowed us to build what is now, if you can include the parking deck, about a $7 million complex with 2 theaters, a 250-seat main stage, and a 80 to 90-seat flexible black box studio space.
With ceilings taller than 8 feet.
With ceilings taller than every ceiling is taller than 8 feet. Even our minor rehearsal room is taller than 8 feet. And so we've been able to do a lot in that space. It's been absolutely spectacular. Some of it's new, some of it's old. The original church houses the studio theater, and then the entire main stage space was all new construction in 2007 when we opened that facility. And so that's gone very, very well. We see over 80,000 people every year at the theater. We do over 850 events a year out of that space.
Wow.
So we do a lot. We bring a lot of people to downtown. The restaurants in downtown will tell you they love us. They'll also tell you when our show is very popular or when it is less popular. They can tell you right away because it all drives their reservations and the patrons that are coming to dine with them before the show or after the show. I think I'm losing the thread of what we were talking about, but
just the history of the theater and how you got.
But
there.
that's how we got there. We were in Duluth. Then we made a deal with the city of Lawrenceville, and we chose to move, which was a hard decision for our board. We had been in Duluth. We had a lot of very committed patrons, and at the time, that adventure to cross I-85 and go to Lawrenceville was not a popular one.
Well, and for those people who may not be familiar with the geography of the state of Georgia, Gwinnett County is a giant county. It's one of the largest counties in the state. It stretches north to south,
and east to west.
And east to west. It's just getting from one side to the other, is not an easy task at any time of day, but especially in the evening to go to a performance, right?
And so we had rolled the dice on losing our patron base completely and having to start all over again. We do a lot of relationship building, and so we sought different groups of our patrons to have a conversation with and bring them to the city of Lawrenceville to have lunch and to look at the space before it was torn down, before we started any of the renovations, before we did anything, and just to start talking to them about what it could be and what was coming. I think those things were important. I think that sort of transparency.
They didn't feel like you were abandoning them. You feel like you were trying to take them with you.
We do
right?
that with our shows too. We don't want to lie about the subject matter. If it's going to be difficult for our audience, we want to let them know it's going to be difficult. Doesn't mean they're going to like it. I get it. But at least we'll have put it out there and we'll be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, nobody's surprised.
Right. They don't go, well, you hoodwinked me. It was bait and switch. I thought it was this show, and you brought me in.
I brought my niece to this, and that was not
Exactly.
appropriate. Yeah. That's great. We're going to take a very short break. We'll be right back with more from Anthony on Futures in Fundraising.
I came to Alexander Haas in 2005 after being the Director of Museum Advancement at the High Museum of Art here in Atlanta. I had been part of a very successful $130 million expansion campaign at the High, but had done consulting previously and had found that was really a true love of mine. So I took a small sabbatical, a couple of months, had some time to me, and then I was invited to join the firm here.
All right, we are back on Futures in Fundraising. Our guest today is Anthony Rodriguez, the producing artistic director for the Aurora Theater.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. Wait till we get a naming opportunity attached to that. Then it's really going to be a mouthful. We were talking about the history of the theater, and you mentioned moving to Lawrenceville and the special purpose local option sales tax, also a mouthful.
Splost.
And I wanted to talk to you about that relationship with the city, because we work with a lot of organizations that have a public-private partnership, and often that partnership is less partnership and more like shotgun wedding. But I think yours is not that. I mean, yours seems to work much better than most. And so I wanted to talk about sort of how that came about, and I'm sure it's a process to get there. But tell us about that relationship with the city of Lawrenceville.
Well, the process doesn't seem as hard in hindsight as it probably was, but it is a unique partnership. I've talked to colleagues across the country, and they're amazed that we've been able to put this together. Essentially what happened with the first facility, and then we'll talk about the expanded facility shortly, is that they purchased the property. They paid for the renovation of the entire facility. We engaged in a capital campaign of what amounted to, it started out as only like a $500,000 campaign, quickly escalated to a $750,000 campaign, and then it wound up at about $1.2 million total. And that was to basically purchase the things that make it operate as a theater. Sound equipment, lighting equipment, all those things. So we put furnishings for the theater, those sorts of things. So we put all that money in. And then, here's the part where it becomes unique. We manage the facility for the city of Lawrenceville. We make sure that we have programming, right? The 850 plus events that we do, the 6 main stage shows, the shows in the studio, the children's playhouse, all of the programming that we do, the Teatro Aurora, all of that stuff, the city doesn't have to pay for. They don't have to maintain the basic maintenance of the building. We pay the electrical bill, we pay the cleaning of the facility, we pay the phone bills, those sorts of things. Our management fee is that we don't pay rent to be in that facility.
Okay.
And so it's a huge win-win for both of us, right? I'm not saddled with, thousands and thousands of dollars a month in a mortgage or a rental payment, and they're not saddled with figuring out how to produce anything.
Or provide cultural programming for the citizens of Lawrenceville. Right?
Exactly. And so I'm often amazed that it's that unique a relationship. It should be very simple. But we've made it work. They trust us now. We've been there since 2007 in the facility, so I'm going on 11 years. Wow, 11 years in that facility. And now we're looking at expanding once again. There's property right next to the theater that encompasses the rest of the block that we sit on. Peach State Federal Credit Union is on one side, and then just an empty lot next to us. So those two pieces of property. Peach State Federal Credit Union happens to be a big sponsor of ours, so they were very interested in what they could do to help, and the city helped make sure that all that could happen. They've got another piece of property they're building a building on. As soon as that's finished, we'll break ground on the expansion project, hopefully by the end of the year, right at the beginning of 2019. So
what does that look like, that expansion? We know how big are we going?
So we'll have a 500 seat main stage theater,
so double the size of
what we have now. But the important part is it will have an orchestra pit and a full fly loft, so we can do the things scenically and musically that we have not been able to do. Okay. I mean, we can put our musicians somewhere, and we always find a place,
backstage or something,
right?
Now?
Or it's above the stage,
but not
on the
ideal.
side.
They can't see the actors,
ideal, right? Well, we do it by video and stuff. So it's not a huge impediment to what we create, but this will be much nicer. So it'll have that 500 seat grand theater, and then a very unique thing that we're putting into the facility is a cabaret space, which will also sort of serve some of the function that our studio theater does now, but in a different way. We'll be able to seat about 150 people at tables if we want like a comedy night or just a traditional cabaret show. We'll also be able to seat about 300 in whatever configurations we want in that space. We'll be able to work on new musicals in that space. And the part that I like the most is that the plan is that the exterior wall of it will open up to the courtyard that's going to be between our existing facility and the new facility. So we'll be able to have special events where the band might be inside or the band might be outside, and the patrons, people flowing between in and out. And that very much excites me. I've been to some theater festivals in other countries, and that sort of public space where people throughout the day, whether or not there's a function or not, can just experience the facility fascinates me, because that's what we want. We want our patrons and our community to have this theater for their own, that it's their space. And that they can come there, they can sit and have lunch in the middle of the
Doors
day.
unlocked all
any
the time,
of those
right?
things. Well, we're there every single day, and so that they can have that space as their own. Because what we're trying to create is not a theater for today. It's a theater that will last 10, 20, 30, 50, long beyond Ann Carroll and my tenure at the theater. Mm-hmm. We want this to be the community's playhouse where they can come and congregate. Now, it's not a community theater in the respect that we're a professional organization. Theater. We hire the actors. We work under union contracts. So that's a little bit different, and those names get a little bit
community space and community theater are different. I mean, different things. But
we want that to be a gathering space.
It sounds like you're creating sort of a centerpiece for the city. I mean, right in the middle of downtown. There's this one giant block facility that's open. That's that has art. I presume there's going to be some. You may even do some continuing education stuff or some.
Right. We have a
students.
great partnership with Georgia Gwinnett College, and with the expanded facility and the expanded campus, we will also be able to increase the offerings that we have and the way that we engage with Georgia Gwinnett College and those students. They've just started a new degree program, CMAP, Cinema, Arts, Media, Production. And so we'll be able to engage with those students. They'll be able to work with professionals. They'll be able to perhaps intern and learn skills from professionals working in the business while they're, right near their own campus. There's so much construction and development planned for Lawrenceville right now, it boggles the mind. There's a $250 million city center thing that they're doing just between City Hall and downtown. There's another project that's about $30 million up the hill from us. It's I think condominiums and apartments. The College Corridor is another $30 million project between Georgia Gwinnett College and the downtown area that'll be a linear park.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be spectacular. And then, of course, the expansion of the Aurora Theater's campus. All of that is happening now.
Concurrently, yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about something. You mentioned this earlier, and I think a lot of people may not know this if they're not from around here, as we say. But Atlanta has a really thriving and growing Latino community. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure I think people think of Atlanta as the home of hip hop, but we have a really vibrant Latino community, and it spreads out not just from the inner city, but throughout the metropolitan area. You guys have really done something to try to engage that with Teatro Aurora, and to try to bring that community together, and maybe not to integrate that community into what you're doing, I think is what. So talk to us a little bit about the genesis of Teatro Aurora and what you're trying to accomplish with that.
So my mother died in 1996. My father died in 2005. Teatro Aurora was born just before my father passed away. It was a way. I'd also lost an aunt and uncle prior to the formation of Teatro Aurora, and I started to feel like I had sort of lost connection with my particular roots. So the beginnings of it, the seeds of Teatro Aurora, were incredibly selfish. I wanted a way to reconnect with my Latino heritage and being Cuban, and so we started by trying to do just not a bilingual show, but we did the show in English, we did the show in Spanish on different nights.
Okay.
That was incredibly difficult.
I have to imagine that was tough for the actors.
Yes. I think most of them still wish me harm.
They have scars.
So when we moved, in the move, we sort of put it on hold because it was a smaller portion of our programming, and there was just so many pieces to the move that I wasn't sure how we were going to keep all the balls juggling in the air. But then when we had 2 spaces in our new facility, it was easier to start to plan for that. And I spoke with some people, and it became very apparent that we didn't need to do it in 2 languages. We needed to do it in 1, because those the people that spoke Spanish, the Latinx community, was craving something that they could feel was very much theirs. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did, and it's been building. Right, every year we do 1 Spanish language show. But what else were we doing? And for several years, we weren't doing much of anything else except that 1 show. Mm-hmm. Well, we got a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and we were able to start expanding so that we have a larger series. We still do the 1 show in Spanish, but we have different nights. Currently, we have something we call Club Babalu, which happens probably once a month, once every couple of months, where we bring in. We just had a Venezuelan band that was very popular, or a salsa band, and we bring in some musicians, singers, different things, so that we can continue to offer stuff to our Latinx community. And
I would think that kind of programming would explode in that cabaret space.
It will, right? And we'll be able to expand that. And so we've put those things. We have sort of Latinx nights on on just random evenings so that we might have a musician in the lobby, so that we begin to build cultural bridges between our patrons, right? Mm-hmm. It's always been my great belief that the more we know about something, the less we can fear those things. So the more we know about one another's cultures, foods, any of those things. And we do that in very small ways. You know, we offer different snacks at our concession stand that you would more than likely find at a Hispanic market. Uh-huh. Just simply so someone might ask a question or try something new. Because those are the things that we can easily relate to and that can help build those cultural bridges between people.
And is it difficult finding the performers who are Spanish speaking?
So yes and no, right? I mean, there are people that want to be in theater, and then there are people that are much better trained, that are bilingual, and that's the thing. We're not at the point that we can afford to have a completely bilingual creative team. So we have to be very careful about how, we can hire people that speak solely Spanish, but then we have to make sure that we can continue to translate back and forth. So right now we're trying to build up the talent pool that we have. And sometimes we have to bring people in from out of town, whether it be directors, designers, sorts of, to do that work, but we're willing to do that. And we do have a very committed sponsor for that series. And we're very happy to have those folks on board to help us out.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to
I have a million other things we could discuss if you want.
We could do that. We'll have to do that on the next episode of Futures in Fundraising.
Come back for part 2 of Anthony Rodriguez on Futures in Fundraising.
We will have to schedule a part 2. Maybe as you get into beginning to break ground and into this next capital campaign, we can have another conversation about that and how that's going.
We'll bring pictures.
And what's going on with that. So don't turn us off. Be sure to join us next time for Futures in Fundraising. Our thanks to Anthony Rodriguez from the Aurora Theater for joining us today.
My pleasure.